You've probably guessed what today's video is about already. Yep, it is the disc wheel. On the right course, these things can be amazing. They improve our airflow around the rear of our bike, they reduce our drag, and they make us faster, free speed. And you're probably thinking right now, oh, lucky you with your expensive disc wheel. But take a closer look, because this is actually a disc wheel cover on an ordinary wheel, but not just any old disc wheel cover, because this is a homemade disc wheel cover, all for under £30. That's a fraction of the cost of a normal disc wheel. And I'm going to show you how you can make one. Right then, here's what you're going to need. So firstly, I've got some ABS plastic here. I bought this for about £12 online. I got it in 1300mm by 660mm. So you want something roughly around that size. I've got it also in a 1mm thickness, give or take. Now that is thick enough to give you enough stiffness for the disc wheel, so it's not flopping around, but also not so thick that it's adding unnecessary additional weight to the wheel. Now you're also going to need a knife, a Stanley knife, to cut that plastic. We're also going to need some sort of glue. So I've got some multi-purpose impact contact adhesive here, but you can also use ABS impact adhesive or pipe weld. That's going to work just the same. So that cost me about £5. You're also going to need some tape. So I've got a few here that I just had at home anyway. So electrical tape, some painter's tape or masking tape, and some gaffer or duct tape. Now you may not need all of these, but you're definitely gonna need the electrical tape and the gaffer tape. And you probably have this at home anyway, but a couple of pens and some cotton or some string. And finally, this is an optional one, but a drill. Now this is just going to make my life a little bit easier. I've got a circular tool on the end for drilling through the plastic, but you can just use a Stanley knife, so don't worry if you don't have one of these. Finally, very important one, the wheel itself. Now I've got a very nice wheel set here. This is a MV wheel set, deep section wheels, and it kind of paints a scenario that a lot of people are probably falling into. You've invested in a nice set of wheels that are good and versatile for most courses out there, but investing in another additional wheel, a disc wheel, which can often be very expensive, is just that little bit too much. So I'm going to use these, and I'm going to put my disc wheel cover onto this, but don't worry if you don't have a wheel set like this, because you can just use a set of standard box rim training wheels too. Okay, so first step is to remove this cassette, and that's going to allow us access to the wheel so we can install the actual disc wheel, and also for our next step, which is measuring up. Now this is one tool that I did forget, but I imagine most people have in their own home, and it's some sort of measuring tool. So I've got a tape measure here, so we can measure from the center of the wheel to the rim. Now we do need to factor in the braking track if you're using rim brakes, and also the fact that we're going to be sticking the disc wheel down, so we need to allow room for that tape. So I'm allowing around a 15 to 20mm clearance from the edge of the braking track on the rim. So if I measure that up, for me that is roughly 28mm. Now obviously we don't have a massive compass here, so that's where these two pens come in, and I've put the cotton between them, tape them on, and that's 28mm. So if we move down to the plastic here, I've already drilled a little hole in the middle here, and that's going to hold that pen there. If I remove the cap there, we can start drawing out the disc wheel. Once you've finally mastered marking up a circle using that tool, which took me a little bit of time, it's now time to cut this out. And I'm going to do this a good old-fashioned way with a Stanley knife onto a cutting board. Make sure you're not doing it onto your favorite table. In an ideal world, obviously we'd get it laser cut, but this is fun and hard work. Right, so I've cut those out. Now the next stage is to cut the holes in the middle for the free hub body and the axle. So measuring my own wheel comes to around 40mm for the free hub body and around 35mm for the axle, but obviously make sure you measure your own because they can differ slightly. Now I have fortunately got a hole saw drill bit here which is exactly 40mm, and I've got one which is around 35mm too. So I'm going to be drilling through using that center point on the wheel that I made earlier when I measured it out, and obviously I've got a couple of old planks here so that I don't damage my decking any further. So here we go. Now another thing to think about is obviously being able to pump the tyres up. So on a lot of disc wheels you have a valve opening. Now this isn't essential given that this is a removable disc wheel cover, but might be quite a nice touch that we can always tape over anyway. So I've marked out a little bit of an opening, and I'm going to do this on the non-drive side, which I've also cut out. So here we go. Okay, so now we've cut them both out. We need to check that they both fit, which they do really nicely. But obviously with the wheel being almost like a cone shape with the spokes sort of graduating out, they're not fitting quite so flush at the moment. So what we need to do is cut a little slither out, and that's going to allow us to then bring the edges round and be able to bond that. So that is our next stage. So I'm going to draw a line and cut along there. And then obviously we need to repeat the same process on the non-drive side. Now pull the edges of the cover around to overlap just enough so that it fits the wheel snugly. Tape it in place, remove it, and then cut along the edge of that inside overlapping seam to remove a small sliver. Okay, so I'm using the gaffer tape at the moment just to pull those edges back together and make that gap really nice and tight so they're as close together as they possibly can be. And then once I've done that, which is more or less there, I'm then going to tape over the painter's tape or the masking tape along that whole centre line, because the next step is cementing those two pieces of plastic together. But you need to make sure that this is on really well. Maybe do a couple of layers because you don't want any of that cement seeping through. Okay, so we've got a nice tight seam there. You can see that cone shape in it. So now it's time to apply the adhesive along that seam on the inside edge with the tape on the outside. So there we go. Okay, so I finished applying here. You can already see actually it's starting to go quite tacky. Obviously for this to bond fully, they recommend that you leave this for around 24 hours. Before then we can start taking that tape off. So I guess it's time to sit back and relax. Wow, I think it's got to be near enough to right now. Right then. Yeah, near enough. I'm probably a little bit impatient here, but I do recommend you leave it 24 hours, but we're probably just good enough to start peeling this tape off. Moment of truth. Well, I've left throughout all of this little film on here that's been protecting it. So this is quite a nice unveiling, if I can grab all of this. And we can start installing this. Right, so now it's ready to install onto the wheel. So I'm going to go drive side first. And all we're going to need now is some gaffer tape, because we are going to go from the inside of the wheel and tape the spokes to the disc cover, and then some electrical tape to go back around the rim on the outside. Nice thing with electrical tape is you can kind of bend it as you go, so you don't need to worry about cutting any strips. Make sure I'm not going over onto the braking track. Right, well that's all done. Looking and sounding pretty good. It's pretty good, isn't it? So now, we've done the drive side, so now the non-drive side. So we just need to place this on there, line up the valve with the valve opening we've just done there. Obviously we can't access the inside, so I can't start gaffer taping it to the spokes, but this is quite a nice snug fit. So what I'm going to do is start with the electrical tape around the outside so it's nicely fixed in place, and then I'll finish off with a little bit of tape around here just to make sure that it's nicely tucked in and tight to the axle hub area. The other area is over the valve opening, so I'm going to put some gaffer tape over that to cover that hole up. That's really important because that is not aero at the moment. And then the final touch is then to put the cassette on. Well, there it is. May not be my finest bit of work, but I'm still pretty proud of that. Solid, and it looks fast. Well, there we go. That is my homemade disc wheel. I think done a rather good job. Maybe a few improvements here and there, but please do get involved. I'd love to see some of your own submissions and attempts at this. So if you do get involved and make your own, do send them in to us so we can have a little look at them. If you liked today's video, please hit that thumbs up button. If you'd like to see more from GTN, click on the globe and subscribe. If you'd like to see our video comparing disc wheel versus non-disc wheel, you can see that by clicking down here.